Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 16th episode of the Experience Talk podcast. And today we'll be speaking about how journey mapping has evolved digitally from traditional ways. I'm Tanuj, and with my friend NK. And today we have a corporate CX champion, a business problem solver, and a CX influencer, Dennis Wakabayashi. Hello,
Hello.
Dennis.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, gentlemen.
It's lovely being here as well, and I love the part which we did before recording. It got me ready, Dennis.
Me too. Great.
And so, Dennis, before we begin and talk about the journey mapping, let's share a little bit about yourself with the audience as well. Tell us how you came into CX, how you came from marketing to CX, and what you do currently.
My story really started as a family dilemma. I was working marketing automation for a restaurant brand, and I made every year I would send my grandmother a coupon to get a rotisserie chicken. And just one time that I did that, my wife went into the store to get the chicken, and there wasn't a chicken ready. And I was very young in my career, but I noticed then there was a connection between the customer experience and the operation supply chain logistics of a company.
Right.
So over the last 20 years, I've just put all my attention into how do we connect supply and demand, or customer and brand, together in a way that creates lifetime value. That's really how
Awesome.
I got into this
So
business.
that inspired you, Dennis, that one incident inspired you to come into CX?
Yes. Well, when you have the same problem, when your wife is not happy with you and your CEO isn't happy, it causes you to focus really specifically.
That's a good one.
No, that's a very good one. I love this, Dennis. And so I'll start. What I like, why we are talking about this topic today, because since COVID hit, we are not able to do. We are not able to involve our different CX stakeholders together. That has been a problem, right?
Yeah.
If we can do all things digitally, that's okay. But the human connection is somewhere missing, right? But how we get still with this missing, a little bit of missing human connection, we still have to do bring them all together, right? Do those journey mapping exercise, use that VOC data. So let's talk about that. So currently in this situation after the COVID times, how are you currently like bringing different stakeholders involved in CX?
Danush, that's a great question, and you're exactly right. Even though some countries are going back to the office, there's still a lot of concern about how we used to do journey maps. Is we would put a post on the wall, and we would use Post-its, and we use different workshop exercises, and people would touch the same Post-its, they'd stand close to each other. And ironically, we have exchanged those Post-it note maps now for digital journey mapping, which you can do collaboratively in a big room where everyone is socially distanced, but you can facilitate it on the screen. You can
Right.
facilitate it through Zoom calls or web
Right.
calls, and bring these stakeholders together in a digital format. And this new digital format presents all kinds of new opportunities for customer experience that the old paper journey maps just weren't able to do.
Okay. And what would you add? Like, what new thing came in this digital mapping, which the old post-its were not able to do?
I would say that one of the newer things is people can use chat or other survey questions on their phones in a
Right.
real environment to give their opinions across the whole audience. So for instance, let's say you're doing a persona and you
Right.
have 25 stakeholders in the room. They can use their cell phones to all pick from a survey, and
Right.
we can display for the entire group what the consensus is for all of the participants. So now we have quantifiable workshop data from
Right.
executives that streamlines the journey mapping process.
That's a very good point.
And what is the one thing that you miss from the
The traditional
digitization
one.
that goes into the so traditional versus digitization? What is the one thing that you miss?
I guess, like anyone, I miss the human interaction and the excitement of working closely with people, and I think that will come back. However, there's a lot of things that were challenging with the old paper maps. If you have ever visited my website, you can find pictures of me with a 12-foot piece of paper and 600 post-it notes trying to transcribe that into a digital presentation that I could give back to the C-suite, and it took forever. And so doing digital journey mapping is just it solves it solves problems for the practitioner, it solves problems for consensus building, and it gives us new hooks into data that validate the journey map and the customer experience
Okay.
better.
Absolutely.
There's also one more thing which is a little like difficult to do is, so when we are on Zoom, right? If currently we are recording a podcast, it's okay. We have put our phones on silent and putting it somewhere else. We don't care because we are on a video, right? So when we're doing Zoom, someone is presenting and you cannot see videos of everyone out there. So at that time, how do you engage with the audience, with those stakeholders, so that they are not involved in their phones or getting distracted?
That is a really good question. I would say you the so perfect example is this experience. We're not
Right.
on our phones,
Absolutely.
and it's because the importance of our communication and our focus is meaningful to the audience. And I would say when I work with senior executives
Right.
and they understand the importance of the customer and addressing the customer in the best way possible, there tends to be a lot of focus in those conversations. And I honestly, maybe when I'm teaching at a college, or I might have more phone issues, but executives who are trying to capture market share that would open up during COVID or the pandemic, or they're trying to recapture lost opportunities or old opportunities from the pandemic. In any case, your customer experience officers, your chief marketing officers, your CTOs, and your CIOs, all of those teams are acutely aware of how important it is to stay focused and getting smart about the customer as soon as possible.
I think I agree with that. Like when there are calls like this, like journey mapping, where the business is involved, like it can help us improve satisfaction, reduce cost, or some revenue, right? So then that is where then people get more involved in this, and I think it's a really good point. So I and NK did that, and we were able to manage it, and we thrown a little of quizzes here and there so that let people don't get snapped, and like suddenly there is a quiz coming in that you have to answer. That helped us a lot, but I think that's a valid point that everyone is so focused at that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. You know, I used to call them stakeholders, and now I call them high stakes holders because they're high stakes now when we have to focus on the customer.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so and in this digital sense, like one thing we mentioned that we have moved to like Miro boards or different digital journey map softwares that people use, the digital ones, right? So like there was one difficulty before that you could not like easily gather VOC data inside those journey maps as well, right?
Yes,
Is that
that's
something that has it's much more easier now, Dennis?
yes. I would say the best transformation in journey mapping since the pandemic is their digitization and our ability to capture key stakeholder or line of business ownership alignment immediately and transfer it into a journey map is
Mm-hmm.
great. But the
Right.
bigger transformation is the fact that you can now validate your journey map by feeding voice of the customer data into your digital journey map. So
Right.
now your executives and your managers and planners can look at a journey map and they can compare it with actual customer feedback or sentiment analysis, they can then see where the strategic team is aligned already or where there's a gap, and of the gaps, which gaps are the most important to address first. So the biggest thing is now we can actually verify and validate customer journey maps against voice of the customer. And I think that's changed a lot of the industry and will continue to disrupt almost every company who's ever done journey mapping prior will probably be wise to switch over to digital journey mapping pretty quickly.
Okay. So if you would have to like share a small example as well, like how you benefited from putting in data, just an example if you have one, if you could share where you benefited when in the journey maps you put in the VOC data and stakeholders were able to relate easily and quickly take a decision.
You know, I think that to be perfectly transparent, the journey mapping has been on halt during the pandemic. So what I've done is I've stayed close to the industry capabilities, because in June at Customer Contact Week, which is the largest customer experience event in the world, it's finally going to be live again. And I'm a workshop teacher for customer experience journey mapping. So I've watched the trends, and what I'm most excited about is being able to facilitate a journey mapping exercise for over 100 people all at once, let them be socially distanced, keep them engaged by their phones, but then feed voice of the customer data into that map and show the delta, where the group nailed it or where they didn't. And really that is going to be the aha moment where I think everyone in the room will realize the importance of your customer care, your contact center or customer resolution, and the data attached to that as a key starting place to reignite or accelerate transformation in a business organization.
Okay. So if I may ask, like it looks pretty exciting. Have you already planned for that, Dennis? That can you share some thoughts about that? Is that okay? That how have you planned that presentation?
I have planned the presentation, and just yesterday I was talking to Sandy Coe. I'm sure if you get a chance to meet Sandy, she's fantastic. She's organizing the event. We talked about a lot of these considerations. How do you facilitate journey mapping and be respectful of the distance that people want to be at? How do we create a takeaway moment that the participants of this workshop understand in a very simple way why a journey map is important, how voice of customer data and the journey map come together to create easy insights. And those insights, how do you take them up to different parts of the organization? But how do you continually evolve those insights and continually refresh the leadership or the organization so that we get closer and closer and closer to the customer and ultimately personalization?
Okay, that sounds like really interesting. And you said around 100 people will be there?
In each class. I'm teaching, the first class will be the how to journey map. And then the second class is how do those journey maps translate into business decisions within an organization, and how do you create consensus to drive change?
Okay. So, this NK, I would like to ask you this question as well, because you have done these trainings and journey mapping as well. How have you related the journey mapping and voice of the customer data together?
Yeah, I think it wasn't so easy way. Let me tell you very frankly, because whenever we have the VOC data and when you bring it onto the table, the first and most important thing is the acceptance, right? So you have to make sure that the sources of the data, how it is, because the product team will say, oh no, this is not right. We don't believe this. We are not doing that bad. We are doing great, right? So we have to make sure that the pre-workshop session. So when we have done this planning of this customer journey mapping, what we have done is we have done a pre-workshop first. So in a pre-workshop, what we defined is discuss the VOC data with the team together and share
Okay.
that data in advance, let them digest it and come with the question in the pre-workshop session and understand that, hey, this is how we look at it. This is where we are as state is, and discuss those questions. And then in the actual workshop, we take that into the consideration where we actually, when we design the journey mapping and then compare those VOC data. So I think like that alignment brings a lot of interaction during the conversation, Dennis.
And
That's a good.
okay, I love that you did that. I've always found it fascinating the
Mhm.
different ways that we get to personas. And for instance, and the advertising agency world, we look at personas in terms of demographics, trends, analysis, behaviors. But what
Right.
I love about what you said is in your practice, you're listening to the actual customer. And that's a game changer right there in terms of alignment. So brilliant insight there. I love hearing when we can start with the real customer.
So and Dennis and NK, both of you, like have how many times has this been the case when the customer was actually involved in a journey mapping?
Oh, well, I'll jump in there. So one of the, I did an entire year going from market to market to market for
Okay.
a national restaurant chain. And I would bring in the franchise owners and we would do the journey mapping exercise, right?
Okay.
But I would bring in customers as well and do the journey mapping exercise. And I would have them do it. I do the customer first, and I would keep their post-its covered. And then I would do the same journey with the franchise owners. And
That's
then
awesome.
them together and reveal where they were aligned and where they were disconnected. And it immediately opened the eyes to the franchise owners that what the customers need isn't
Right.
always the solution that the franchise owner is putting in place.
I think this is a really excellent example, Dennis. I think
Great, great.
like so generally what the kind of journey mappings I have been is where we'll do the journey mapping and then involve the customer to validate it. But this is a fun way of doing it. Like you get it done by the customer, you hide everything, and when you do it with, oh, this is amazing. And what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I love this, and I would really would try this methodology as well in the next exercise.
You know,
What
we
we have,
I was gonna say, if you ever want to talk offline, NK, I can share with you some of the more specific examples and how I did it.
yeah,
What
yeah,
it was rewarding for everyone to have these eye-opening
yeah,
moments.
and I love the idea because like every CX professional has something unique way to do this, and that is why we speak so many to the people to understand their own experience. So in my experience, what we have done is that we speak to the customer offline and we record their videos on those questions and those journeys and their experience, and then share those videos in our pre-workshop to the customer, while we are actually sharing our VOC data with them to socialize that data to all the participant of the people who are joining that from the team, but also a couple of like snippets of videos, actual feedback coming out to the customer to relate with that. So how they felt about specific journey touch point, their feedback. I
Mm-hmm.
think that made lot of impact on actually digesting those feedbacks and actually acting more, showing more empathetic way to be a part of that improvement plan, Dennis.
I agree with that. I love the idea of the use of videos. I've been in a few where videos have been used, so I know that that's an effective way. And to your point, regardless of the tactic, true empathy and understanding for the customer, whichever way a leader wants to get there is great. But it all comes down to what do we know about our customer? What do they need? What's
Mm-hmm.
bothering them? What's making them happy? How do we do more of what makes them happy? And how do we resolve the challenges that they're having as soon as possible? Because in that resolution, it's one thing to make a customer happy, But when you solve a customer problem, there's a strategic business insight. And those are where some of those nuggets of innovation become relevant to an organization and improve revenue.
Yeah, I like the last word, like you said about innovation. I think customer journey, if we do this and if there is no innovation, then it's like I feel like we have not done it right. So there are some hidden sources are there, and then we push challenges to our participant to think, beyond that. And I think we always innovate a lot of things when we end the story. So yeah, I think like I really liked about it, Dennis.
And of course, when you bring the voice of the customer, you can bring it in from all these different channels, and you can listen to it coming in, and you can listen to it coming back out from resolution. So you have a feedback loop that I think overcomes some of the challenges of innovation. In organizations, I always like to start by saying people love innovation, but they hate change. And so when you can create a feedback loop inside the organization, it helps overcome the fear or the challenges of change and helps you just tip the scale a little bit towards innovation.
Right.
Yeah, we tell them the change is your promotion or change is the revenue. Change is the new revenue, right? That's another word that I use for creating it. So change is the revenue. So if you don't change, there is no revenue. If you change, there is a revenue. So that's another way to get into the shoe. Yeah.
Okay, do you mind if I use that in some of my next
Oh yeah,
conversations?
yeah, absolutely.
Just want to get on the record. NK said I could do that.
And Dennis, I have another question, because you have been in marketing a lot as well, right?
Yes.
From would you like to share an example where voice of the customer data helped you in producing some content or some kind of stuff in marketing that help your customers engage with you? Any one example?
Here's the thing. I'll back up and I'll say, going into 2019, we saw a large shift away from voice of the customer data because media players had really started to dominate the conversation around what a customer looks like. And they even had the term lookalike for customers. And because they had such big budgets, they were able to control that narrative. Then going into the pandemic, we saw clearly the truth. The moment of truth for the industry was customer care became the glue that held any person who was working out there in the workforce and every customer who was at home in quarantine together. And that became the nexus or the central part of the conversation around, wow, we're getting closer to our customers than ever. Our customer call centers are scaling through the cloud across working from home options. It's improving the footprint of customer care, the tangibility of what we know from customers. And so what I would say is, I would point less at one particular way of using voice of customer data to everyone should be tapping into voice of the customer data, because we're at the golden age of voice of customer right now with our technologies, because you can gather voice of customer from so many different systems, and you can condense it down into simple business decision dashboards that are relevant to all of the folks. Back to NK, what we were talking about, the change agents in an organization. Wow, I was ranting there, but you got me excited.
No, I think there's been a lot of change. So there's a person that works with us in marketing as well. So what they mentioned, a completely strange thing from Indonesia. Now people like how the customers have changed buying behaviors is that they're looking for stuff which has more vitamins in it. And that is something that we got from the VOC data only, that people love to buy stuff which have vitamins in it. And some brands have started, like even if there is a chocolate, then they will just add with vitamin this. And it
Yeah.
has impacted that Indonesian marketing a lot, like how people are doing marketing there. So that is just for Indonesia. I don't know about the VOC, what we would have done in US. That is that something similar, but that is one change which has completely shifted. And the other one that we noticed, again from VOC, is in 2009, people in like this part of the world didn't care about plastic bottles, plastic bags, and everything was okay. There was no environmental change or anything. And suddenly, when the COVID hit, people have shifted to stuff like they'll take their own paper bags to buy something, like so they don't have to use plastic. They'll spend more on stuff which does not include plastic, and they're okay with it. And that environmental factor and these vitamins thing are two complete different changes that we have seen in the behavior once we hear that VOC data. Has
Yeah.
that something like that happened in the US as well?
Well, I would say, as far back as 20 years ago, there were pizza chains who were getting feedback from their customers about
Right,
the quality of their foods or their delivery practices. I think we see that more and more. And in the US specifically, we get a lot of that the first sign of change in the customer landscape starts in social. So social
right,
listening starts to pick up the conversation externally. And then
right,
when it hits the call centers or the customer care agents, that's when we know that there's a moment of truth. So without pointing to a specific brand, and just Tanuj, I try to steer away from specific brands because I work with so many large brands. I don't ever want to favor one over another, but I would say we see in social listening, we hear about the reputation impacts as it comes in through our call centers. Our customer care agents validate that information, and then our systems pick that up, and we can then translate that through other interfaces into direct to print or direct to media or direct to direct mail. At our company, at RR Donnelley, we service so many integrated channels that we would take any voice of the customer data, moment of truth that's acknowledged by key stakeholders, and
right.
translate that into personalized marketing across all customer touchpoints that are relevant.
That
Awesome.
is okay. I would love to talk more on that. Uh, how would like now this data has been used for personalization, right? Like you mentioned.
Yes.
Can you go in a bit of detail about this? Because I see everywhere now, YouTube, Netflix, Spotify, these people are famous for personalization, right? They do personalization really, really well. And I think other products have started to come in. So how do you take this, like the data that you mentioned from any different channels of this voice of the customer data, or maybe the usage data, and make something more personalized for the customer?
The easiest example I can talk to you about there is video games.
Right.
So So in the case of selling video games, if you ingest voice of customer data and you also take in point of sale data,
Hmm.
e-commerce data, loyalty data, and you bring that together, what you will find is that there is a specific window after the point of purchase of a console. There's a certain window that is important to reach the customer in that window and that window only. And then
Okay.
after that window, it becomes 6 months to 18 months before you get another opportunity. Now, what's interesting about that is reaching that customer anytime outside of that window is total waste. So, waste of direct mail, waste of packaging, waste of media. So, when we use customer intelligence and behavior at scale, we can connect not just the marketing, but also the product journeys. So you have the right inventory at the right location with the right messaging in the right window to drive the more accurate strategies to reveal new revenue.
Okay. So in this video game example that you mentioned, uh, is there a like live example that you have already done, Dennis, or something like that? If you could reveal.
I won't reveal. I can't reveal any sources, but what I will say is that there is a specific window after the time of any console purchase that a customer will come back for accessories and games, and then after that window closes, you won't see that customer for another year or so. So there's definitely a moment of truth in that there are key buying times for each product. It can be video games, it can be tennis shoes, it can be electronics of any sort. There, just while you bring it up, there's this new concept called the ownership experience. I just finished up a YouTube about it, but ownership experiences give you this connection between the product, so washing machine, and customer, that opens up a direct line of communication so that you can get customer engagement directly without having to go back through the retailer. So there's a lot of change in this area, I guess is what I'm saying. And any example that I would give you, I just try to stay brand agnostic.
No, that's okay. We understand.
I think I will, don't worry, Tanuj. I'm going to ask this question a little differently to Dennis. So my question to you, Dennis, is how does RRD create a great customer experience for your own customer? So what processes do you do, and how do you deliver a great customer experience? We can give us some insights to that.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak about RR Donnelley. I love RR Donnelley because we have the ability to manage first-party data. We started out way back in the day printing the phone books. So we had name, address, phone number, and the logistical heritage, lineage, legacy, transformation to now of working directly with customers and data. So that capability allows us now to use our vast number of touch points, from simple printing your invoice, maybe that comes to your home, to your packaging, to your catalogs, direct mail, direct marketing, in-store marketing, and print on demand capabilities connected with marketing automation and email and e-commerce strategies, media strategies. At RRD, we're able to take any brand and connect their traditional marketing and their digital marketing with customer data so that personalized marketing becomes a reality for them with lower operational costs from a marketing perspective and more efficiency. So we're breaking the mold in terms of what traditional agencies that they could do versus what direct marketing solutions firms can deliver today.
Yeah, and I think that sounds really great, Dennis. And just in case, like, if you could share like your best customer experience that you ever had, and it always motivates to do a better for your own customers. So what would you like, if you can share that experience with us?
So to bring it back full circle, my grandmother and this chicken. It took 2 years. It took 2 years working with supply chain and logistics and finance to find out how many days you had to be ahead of the customer conversation and to getting chickens into the stores, to the restaurant. So my biggest, most rewarding customer experience moment was when I was able to go to supply chain 8 weeks in advance and say, you're going to need 16 more chickens at all of the restaurants in this location in this time period. That for me was an operational aha, but inside I was happy because I imagined my wife or my CEO going into that store and there would be the chicken for them right there.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think I recollect that conversation, but I just wanted to see. And have you ever seen your customers have how your customer has expressed to RR Donnelley about their own experience? If you could share that, something around that.
You know, at RR Donnelley, we are a large group of specialists who serve service brands specific needs. So I don't typically, if I'm working with a customer, I get the customer feedback directly from the
Okay.
CMO or the
Yeah.
CXO.
Mm.
And that my contact or my client is the person who listens or doesn't listen to the customer. And in either case, you know, we, by the time your data gets to Donnelley, RRD, we have the moments of truth and we have the customer touch points. So for us, it's really an operational execution at that point to reach customers at scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. I think just to be in, like, make sure that we are in interest of your time. Tanuj, do you have any? I have one more question to ask Dennis before we close, but just want to check: is there anything else that you would want to add,
No,
Tanuj?
go ahead, NK.
Yeah. So one last question for our audience, Dennis. That what is the one experience or what is one soundbite that you want listeners to go about it?
It's always the same thing for me. I always think that there are two things that you need. You need empathy, empathy for your teammates, empathy for customers, empathy for stakeholders, empathy for shareholders. And when you
Mm-hmm.
create an organization or a conversation that's empathetic, empathy leads to collaboration. It's the collaboration that causes the growth in an organization. And that could be growth in revenue, growth in culture, growth in customer lifetime value. So I always emphasize empathy and collaboration lead to growth. And if you can deliver on those three things, then you're really part of the CX conversation on every level.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's a great answer.
I really loved it, Dennis. And I think like being a CX evangelist myself, like, and I'm too much of like, the like promote the empathy, because empathy is the backbone of the customer experience, right? So if there is no
Of the
empathy, we can't
experience.
stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I really loved the conversation, Dennis, and really thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today.
Guys,
Oh,
just one last question to both of you.
okay.
Sorry. Uh, we all talk about empathy, and you guys, especially the CX guys, talk a lot about empathy. If we have to train someone on empathy, what is the one advice that you would give? It can be a book, it can be a YouTube video, it can be anything that helped you in becoming more empathetic. The person, because see, there are new people who are coming in, who are entering customer support, who are entering CX, which are just like freshers, 1 year experience, 2 year experience. They have heard about this word empathy, but they don't know how to bring empathy in them, right? Is there something that any like example, any book, any video that helped you out, that motivated you, that you would like to share, that people like junior people can also take help with?
NK, you want to take that first?
Yeah, means, how do I say? There is a lot of things actually. So there is a book from Jenny Bliss that I like about empathy. So you read that, customer stories inside out. You listen to that, and she's a great person. And if she has like great podcast on that also. So I really learned a lot from that. And there is a lot of other I can talk about so more, like for empathy there are so many leaders available, like are there, to whom I follow on, and I listen to them, their success stories. In one of the Michelle Obama, I have listened to Barack Obama. So
Okay.
like there's true stories, like how they have seen that progress in their life and their hardship, and uh, that gives us so much of power to talk about how they have raised themselves in the tough situations, and and people want to make sure that the other don't suffer that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there the real pain goes out there, so that brings you empathy. And I would say that if somebody needs to be empathetic at the heart, he needs to feel it. If you're not able to feel it, then I think it is just not a superficial layer that you can deliver, like, oh, I am very empathetic to my customer. No, if you are not curious about it, like if you don't have a curiosity about understanding your customer, then you cannot be empathetic, right? So it's more of like knowing your customer more and more
Mm-hmm.
is going to make you eligible for being more empathetic and deliver a great experience to the customer. Yeah,
Okay, so
that's my
I'll
way.
take two things from here. One, listen to Jeannie Bliss a lot, and the
Yeah,
second is just look at the like biographies, autobiographies of Mitchell and Michael,
yeah,
like Barack Obama, and that would
yep,
help a lot.
yeah.
Now to you, Dennis.
In the essence of respecting both of your gentlemen's time, I would echo that. It's funny. I'm glad I let you go first, NK. Gene Bliss was the author that really made me commit to CX. So
Okay.
Gene, absolutely, that we share that as uh, CX folks. And I would say yesterday I was getting into a great conversation on LinkedIn where I was speaking to the audience, and someone brought up the point of listening to customers. And I would just leave your audience with, at the heart, I think, of empathy, you can really say listening equals learning. If you're
Yep.
listening, you're learning. And that's how we grow as people. We become more tolerant, we become more inclusive, diversity becomes an asset, and corporate culture becomes healthier, and ultimately customers become happier. I think they're all connected. When you listen, you
Listening.
learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think listen and learn. That's another good trick that we can use. I think
Yeah.
thanks a lot,
We
both
can
of
we
you,
can we can
NK and
we,
Dennis.
we can talk about empathy for a whole hour if you want, Tanuj.
That's true.
No, I love this conversation. I love the see. There are like few key takeaways that I'll definitely take out from this. Love the way how NK you explained bringing VOC in the pre-workshop time, and loved the hiding idea from you, Dennis, about journey mapping that I'm definitely going to steal.
All
Uh,
right.
yeah, and then listening and learning, and how you shared one common person that you learned a lot about empathy. So thanks a lot, guys. Pleasure speaking to you as always. And Dennis, I'll need to speak with you more in a
Of
couple of
course.
weeks time once you are free. So let's discuss more about that. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot,
Definitely.
and thanks
thank you.
audience for listening in. Yeah, NK.
Yeah, I just say thank you so much, Dennis, for being so a great person, and sharing some great stories that we can also use in our day-to-day life. So great, really great speaking to you, Dennis, today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And listening to both of you, I've learned quite a bit today. So the pleasure is mine as well, gentlemen. I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Done. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thank you, Dennis. Bye bye.
Bye.